Today we're taking a look at a dark and unsettling tale that takes us back to the late 19th century in Buren County, Michigan. A young couple were brutally murdered in September 1879, leaving a small farming community shaken, and an investigation that uncovered more questions than answers. This is the story of Henry and Esther Morris. Hello friends, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. In 1879, Van Buren County, Michigan was a rural agricultural hub in the southwestern part of the state, reflecting a patchwork of small farming communities like Little Prairie Ronde where Henry and Esther lived. The area's economy primarily depended on farming, with local families cultivating corn, wheat, oats, and other crops that were staples in this fertile land. The county was known for its rolling prairies and abundant woodlands, which attracted settlers in the early to mid-1800s. Many of these settlers, like the Morris family, were drawn from eastern states, bringing with them traditional farming practices and establishing homesteads in what they hoped would be prosperous lands. These families relied on each other for labor and community, which fostered a tight-knit society. Given the isolation of farmsteads, neighbors were often each other's first responders in times of crisis. Despite this closeness, however, the area was also marked by fierce independence, with families self-sufficient in most of their needs and tending to keep private matters within the family circle. Charles Henry Morris, known as Henry, was the youngest son of Dolphin Morris, one of the area's earliest settlers. Dolphin and his brothers moved from South Carolina in 1829, with Dolphin eventually establishing the homestead known as Little Prairie Ronde in Van Buren County. This expansive homestead, covering 360 acres of fertile farmland, left the family well off. After his father's death, Henry lived on the homestead with his mother in a large, elegantly furnished farmhouse, with his 3 brothers and 1 sister living on nearby farms. It was a quiet place, with their nearest neighbor a half-mile away. Henry, age 32, was described as a friendly and good-natured man with no enemies. His pretty wife Esther was known for her intelligence, charm, and elegance. They'd been married for 10 years, and although they had no surviving children, having lost their only child as an infant the year before, they led a quiet, seemingly contented life, managing their farm with the help of 2 hired hands, Jenny Bull, a domestic servant who had been with them for 5 years, and John Klinger, a recently hired farmhand. It was Sunday evening, September 28, 1879, when Henry and Esther returned home after visiting a friend, John Gould, in nearby Porter Township. Jenny had been away most of the day, spending time with her family, and returned to the homestead around 6:15 p.m., shortly before Henry and Esther arrived. As John was at his own home tending to a sick wife, Henry, with assistance from Esther and Jenny, did the evening chores. Jenny prepared a meal, and the family retired for the evening shortly after 8 p.m. The following morning, Jenny woke late at around 6 a.m. and hurried downstairs where she discovered the kitchen door wide open and the screen door closed. Through the screen, she saw Henry lying lifeless on the porch. Terrified and without looking for Esther, she ran to a neighbor's house to raise the alarm. Meanwhile, John, who had arrived to begin his work for the day, was in the barn tending to the horses when he noticed Henry's pants laying on a manure pile and one of the horses missing from the stable. He headed to the house where he found Henry lying on the porch. Believing he was ill, he looked closer to find a wound to Henry's neck. He immediately fled to the home of Henry's brother Elias to raise the alarm. The bodies of Henry and Esther revealed signs of a brutal attack. Henry had been shot twice, once in the chest and again in the neck at close range, with the second shot leaving his face covered in gunpowder residue. Esther was found in a closet with a revolver laying nearby. Evidence suggests she may have rushed to Henry's aid, but encountered the intruder instead. Lying on her left side, she was shot twice, suffering a fatal wound to her chest. Curiously, her purse, which contained over $100, about $3,100 in today's money, and valuable family items like gold watches, remained untouched, ruling out robbery as the motive. Neighbors and the local coroner examined the crime scene and found bullet holes scattered throughout the house, with several lodged in walls and floors. The gunpowder burns and trajectories indicated that the assailant had wielded a large revolver, possibly a Colt Navy or a Remington. It was surmised that Henry and Esther had gone to bed and were disturbed shortly thereafter by someone who was at the kitchen door on the east porch. Without stopping to put on his pants, Henry had gone to check it out. The murderer was laying in wait and shot Henry in the chest, the bullet passing through Henry and lodging in the partition between the porch and the pantry. A second shot was fired as Henry fell, entering the right side of his neck and lodging on the left side just below the shoulder blade. Either wound would have been fatal. Esther, upon hearing the shots, grabbed a revolver that Henry kept under his pillow and rushed to assist him, but before reaching the kitchen was confronted by the assailant. He fired at her once in the sitting room, missing her, and the bullet entered the northwest corner of the room. Esther does not appear to have used her weapon, instead retreating through her bedroom, hoping to escape. From near the bedroom door another shot was fired, resulting in a flesh wound to Esther's left arm, with the bullet passing through her into the bureau drawer. She was cornered in the closet and either fell or was pushed down onto her face and left side. The two shots, one entering her left breast and the second entering her left side, were so close it set her clothes on fire. Then, for whatever reason, the assailant picked up Henry's pants and vest, dropping the vest in the kitchen and tossing the pants aside as he went to the barn for a horse. He passed stalls containing other horses and deliberately took the fastest, although no saddle, bridle, or other tack was missing. The same night as the murder, 2 local men reported seeing a mysterious rider on a fast horse near the homestead. Charles Rosewarne, a young neighbor, reported that he was returning from a Sunday school concert about 9:15 p.m. when he was nearly run down by a masked rider going west from the Morris homestead and mounted, with saddle and bridle, on the missing horse. He clearly recognized the missing Morris horse in the moonlight by its distinctive markings. Another neighbor, Abner Hathaway, also saw the rider heading west about 20 minutes later, 3 miles from the homestead. He too recognized the horse. He described the rider as having a medium build with a gray beard, wearing a slouched black hat and white mask covering most of his face. The stolen horse was found later that morning near South Bend, Indiana, about 40 miles away, without any tack. He had the distinctive marks of having recently worn a saddle, and flakes of white foam were dried on his hair. He was cool to the touch, which indicated he had not been ridden for 2 to 3 hours. The route of travel indicated that the rider had made his way directly from the Morris homestead, suggesting a calculated plan and intimate knowledge of the area. The funeral for Henry and Esther was held on Tuesday, September 30th, 1879, at their home with the Reverends Carlisle, Wallace, and Clark officiating. They laid side by side in their caskets in the parlor, with wreaths of flowers and floral crosses adorning each casket, with a silver engraved plate on each reading "Rest in Peace." A funeral procession of 300 horse teams and 3,000 people followed the caskets to the family cemetery, now known as the Anderson Cemetery, 1.5 miles from the homestead. Initially, suspicion fell on Riley Huntley, a former hired hand for Henry Morris. Huntley had worked for the Morris family for several years and was considered a reliable worker, but was known to drink heavily, which eventually led to his dismissal. However, by all accounts, Huntley and Morris parted ways amicably, and Huntley was quickly ruled out as a suspect, although he lived in the vicinity of South Bend, where the stolen Morris horse was found. Huntley would later make a complaint before Justice Haynes in Decatur, charging Floyd Smith with complicity in the murder. His reason for doing so was never made public. About 3 months after the murders, on December 17th, Floyd Smith, the overseer of the Milo Matson farm, was taken into custody by Constable Botsford and an unnamed associate around 9 p.m. at the Matson farm. According to Constable Botsford, on the way to the jail in Decatur, the officers encountered a group of 10 to 15 masked men. Initially thinking they were farmers returning home from a Grange meeting, Botsford quickly realized the men had other intentions. The group seized the horses, pulled Smith from the sleigh, and allowed the officers to proceed on without Smith, taking him into the nearby woods. According to Smith, however, the incident with the masked men transpired differently. He claimed that after stopping, the constable and his assistant left the sleigh, leaving him with a group of men. Blindfolded, Smith was driven toward town, with the group stopping 4 times. Each time, he was strung up in an attempt to coerce a confession. During one of these attempts, Smith's blindfold slipped, allowing him to recognize several men in the group, including the constable and his assistant. Despite the intimidation, Smith insisted he was home on the night of the murders and had no connection to the crime. He stated that his captors pressured him to implicate James Matson, whom he did not know, but he refused. He did confess that he had received letters intended for his boss Milo Matson, who was embroiled in several court cases and was concerned about law enforcement intercepting his mail. Newspapers of the time reported this incident as an attempted lynching. Smith maintained his innocence, and since no concrete evidence ever linked him to the crime, the charges against him were ultimately dismissed. As the investigation continued, one theory pointed to a long-standing feud involving a forgery and mortgage dispute with Milo Matson. Henry had just begun a bitter legal battle with Matson over a $10,000 mortgage which Matson claimed he held against Henry's farm, and which Henry claimed was forged. It is worth noting that Matson and Henry's brother Amos had just settled a 6-year lawsuit wherein Matson claimed to have held 3 mortgages on Amos's farm, but which were later found to be forgeries. After this settlement, and just prior to Henry's death, Matson had claimed to hold a mortgage on Henry's farm. Although Matson was in Decatur attending church with his wife at the time of the murders, some locals believed that the family feud could have led Matson to hire an assassin. Pinkerton detectives were called in, yet no concrete evidence pointed to anyone. Some suspected that Henry and Esther's deaths were meant to silence them in the mortgage dispute, while others believed it was an act of simple revenge. Ultimately, no one was held accountable. There are several obvious unanswered questions. The position of Henry's vest on the kitchen floor and his pants on top of the manure pile don't make sense to me. Custom of the day would have dictated Henry putting his pants on before he answered the door, even in the middle of the night. He would not have gone to the door in just his nightshirt if he thought someone was there. So this would raise the question of the real reason he was at the door or on the porch. Could it have been as simple as him having to visit the outhouse and stumbling on someone? This would also explain why he didn't take his gun with him. There were 2 theories on this at the time. Either he had his pants and vest with him, intending to put them on, or the assailant picked the pants and vest up from the bedroom as he fled. The first theory is plausible, but the second one does not make sense since the pants had valuables in the pockets. It seems unlikely a perpetrator would have taken them outside and not looked through the pockets before tossing them. Henry's unfired gun is another unanswered question. Why didn't Esther fire it? They lived in a very rural farming community, and again, custom would dictate that she would have known how to shoot. If she had gotten it from its hiding place because she heard a commotion with Henry, why didn't she shoot? Even if she recognized the assailant, surely she would have fired back as she was being assaulted. Another conundrum is the stolen horse. It was known throughout the area as the fastest horse in the county, which made it very valuable. Its distinctive markings were identifiable to everyone who knew the Morris family. By passing up 2 other horses in the stalls nearest the barn entrance, it would suggest that someone knew the horse, its speed, and its value. But again, it was very distinctive and was easily recognizable to those who saw it that night, and even to the sheriff in South Bend, who immediately knew the horse belonged to Henry. A local person would not have been able to conceal the fact that he had this horse. And while no tack was taken from the farm, the witnesses clearly saw the rider in a saddle. Why bring your own saddle and bridle to a murder scene? How did the assailant get the tack to the location? Was he on another horse, or did someone help him? While we will never know the answers to these questions, I believe the answers hold the key to solving this 145-year mystery. The murders of Charles Henry Morris and his wife Esther remain one of Michigan's most perplexing mysteries. While the truth may be forever buried with them, stories like theirs remind us that even in history's shadows, justice and peace are not always guaranteed. This case lingers as a haunting reminder of the dark possibilities lurking in country life and the fragile peace that was shattered on that September night in 1879. If you have any thoughts, theories, or comments about the murders of Henry and Esther Morris, please leave them in the comment section below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.